My name is Sarah, and for the longest time I just wanted to be invisible. After Mark, my husband, passed away from that sudden heart attack, the world lost its color. He was my sunshine, my rock, the one who believed I could do anything, even when I doubted myself. We'd poured our hearts and savings into the Sweet Spot, our little bakery on Main Street in Oak Haven. It was his dream, mostly. But I loved the smell of yeast and sugar, the warmth of the ovens, the quiet rhythm of kneading dough. After he was gone, the bakery was all I had left of him, a fragile link to the life we'd built. Oak Haven is a small town, the kind where everyone knows your name and your business, but in a good way, mostly. They were kind after Mark died. Casseroles appeared on my doorstep, folks offered quiet condolences, and they kept coming to the Sweet Spot, even if my smiles were watery and my chatter was gone. I just focused on the baking, the cinnamon rolls Mark loved, the sourdough he'd taught me to perfect, the cookies that little Lily from next door adored. Each loaf, each pastry was a little piece of him, a little piece of me. I'm not a confrontational person, never have been. I'm more of a, let's talk it out, or, more often, a, let's just avoid it kind of woman. I'm average. Height, a bit soft around the edges from all the taste testing, and my hands are usually dusted with flour. My voice is quiet. Mark used to tease me, saying I whispered even when I was excited. So, when the Iron Disciples Motorcycle Club started making Oak Haven a regular stop, I just tried to blend into the wallpaper, hoping they wouldn't notice. Me or my little bakery. It started subtly. A few bikes at first, roaring down Main Street, loud enough to rattle the antique windows of the Sweet Spot. Then more of them. They'd park their gleaming, chrome-laden machines right in front of the shops, taking up all the customer parking. They favored Gus's bar at the end of the street, but their presence spilled out everywhere. They were loud, boisterous, and honestly, a bit scary. Big men mostly, dressed in leather vests adorned with patches I didn't understand. Their faces, often hidden behind beards and sunglasses. Their laughter was harsh, and their language, well, it wasn't the kind you'd hear in Mrs. Gable's knitting circle. At first, I'd just duck my head when they passed, pretending to be engrossed in wiping down the counter or arranging a display of muffins. My heart would do a little flutter kick, a nervous bird trapped in my chest. I'd tell myself, they're just passing through. They'll get bored of Oak Haven soon enough. But they didn't. They started treating Main Street like their personal playground, revving their engines at all hours, throwing cigarette butts on the clean sidewalks old Mr. Henderson swept every morning, catcalling women who walked by. My customers started dwindling. Mrs. Periwinkle, who always came for her Saturday scone, stopped coming. She told me, her voice trembling a little, that she just didn't feel safe walking past those men. My heart ached for her, and for the business Mark and I had built. I tried talking to Sheriff Brody. He's a good man, but Oak Haven's police force is small. Sarah, he said, sighing, rubbing his temples. I know they're a nuisance, but they haven't technically broken any major laws. Loitering? Disturbing the peace? I can give them warnings, and I have, but they just laugh it off. My hands are a bit tied unless they do something more serious. More serious. What would that be? The atmosphere in town grew heavier, like a storm brewing. People hurried along. Main Street, eyes down. The usual friendly greetings became muted. The laughter of children playing in the small park by the fountain seemed to fade. The Iron Disciples were like a dark cloud, sucking the joy out of our little town. One afternoon, a group of them, led by a particularly large man with a scar that snaked from his eyebrow to his jaw, they called him Spike, swaggered into the Sweet Spot. The little bell above the door tinkled, a cheerful sound that suddenly felt out of place. My breath hitched. There were 5 of them, and they filled my small shop, their leather and denim and sheer bulk seeming to suck all the air out. Well, what have we got here? Spike drawled, his eyes cold and assessing, raking over my display case. The other snickered. Can I help you? I managed, my voice barely a squeak. I hated how small I sounded. Yeah, sweetheart, Spike said, leaning on the counter, his face too close. I could smell stale beer and cigarettes on his breath. Give me a couple of those, whatever they are. He pointed a thick finger at the blueberry muffins. I carefully bagged them, my hands trembling so much I almost dropped one. That'll be $6, I whispered. He threw a $10 bill on the counter. Keep the change, sweetheart, for your trouble. He winked, a gesture that felt more like a threat than a kindness. They took their muffins and left, their booming laughter echoing behind them. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, and leaned against the counter, my legs feeling like jelly. This became a regular occurrence. They'd come in, demand food, sometimes pay, sometimes forget, always leaving me feeling rattled and small. They never bought much, but their presence was enough to drive away other customers. If anyone else was in the shop, they'd quickly pay and leave, avoiding eye contact with the bikers. The breaking point, the moment something inside me snapped, wasn't even about me directly. It was about Mrs. Henderson. She's in her late 80s, frail as a bird, but with a spirit as bright as the flowers she grows in her window boxes. She lives in the small apartment above her late husband's old hardware store, which had been closed for years. Every morning, she'd walk slowly but determinedly to the sweet spot for a cup of tea and a plain scone. It was her ritual. One Tuesday morning, I saw her approaching, her walker clicking softly on the pavement. Just as she was about to reach my door, two of the bikers, lounging on a bench nearby, started making loud barking noises at her like dogs. Then they howled with laughter. Mrs. Henderson froze. I saw her tiny shoulders slump. She turned around. Her face pale and slowly, painstakingly, began to make her way back home, without her tea, without her scone. Something inside me, something that had been dormant since Mark died, roared to life. It wasn't courage, not then. It was pure, unadulterated rage. How dare they? How dare they treat a sweet, harmless old lady like that? How dare they take away her small joy, her little bit of independence? I untied my apron, my hands shaking, but this time with anger, not fear. I walked out of the bakery, straight towards those two bikers. They were still chuckling. "Excuse me," I said, and my voice, to my own surprise, was clear and steady, louder than I'd spoken in months. They looked up, surprised. "What do you want, little lady?" One of them sneered. "You will apologize to Mrs. Henderson," I said, my gaze fixed on them. "Right now." They looked at each other, then burst out laughing again. "Apologize? To that old bat? You serious?" "Yes," I said, my chin jutting out. "I am serious. What you did was cruel and disrespectful. This is her home. You are guests here, and you are behaving abominably." The taller one stood up. He loomed over me. "Listen, lady, you better watch your mouth before you get yourself in trouble." My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but I stood my ground. Mark always said I had a spine of steel hidden under all my softness. Maybe he was right. "No," I said. "You listen. You will not treat people in this town that way. Not anymore." He took a step closer, and for a second, I thought he might hit me. I flinched internally, but kept my eyes on his. Then, Spike's voice cut through the air. "Hey, what's going on here?" He strolled over from across the street, the other bikers trailing him. The biker in front of me backed off a little. "This little baker bitch is telling us what to do, Spike." Spike looked at me, a flicker of something, surprise, amusement, in his eyes. "Is that so, sweetheart?" "They frightened Mrs. Henderson," I said, my voice still surprisingly firm. "An elderly woman. They barked at her. It was despicable." Spike looked at his men, then back at me. A slow grin spread across his face. Boys just having a bit of fun. Darlin', old lady needs to lighten up. Fun? I almost choked on the word. There is nothing fun about bullying the vulnerable. There is nothing fun about making people feel unsafe in their own homes, on their own streets. Big words for a little baker, Spike said, his grin fading. He took a step towards me. Maybe you need to learn your place. And that's when I knew. I knew I couldn't back down. Not for myself, maybe, but for Mrs. Henderson, for Mrs. Periwinkle, for little Lily, who was now too scared to come for cookies, for Mark and the dream he'd had for this town and this bakery. My place, I said, my voice ringing out clear and strong, is right here, in my town, protecting my friends and neighbors, and you and your friends are no longer welcome here if this is how you intend to behave. There was a stunned silence. Even the usual street noises seemed to hold their breath. Spike stared at me, his eyes narrowed. I could see the anger coiling in him. I braced myself. Then, from behind me, a voice. She's right. It was Mr. Petrov, who ran the hardware store across the street. He was a quiet man, usually, but he was standing there, his arms crossed, his face set. You've all gone too far. Another voice, Mrs. Gable, from the yarn shop. We've had enough. Slowly, one by one, other shopkeepers and a few residents who had been watching nervously from doorways and windows stepped out. Tom, the young mechanic from the garage, still, wiping grease from his hands. Maria, from the diner, holding a spatula like a weapon. Even old Mr. Henderson, Mrs. Henderson's son, who rarely came out, stood on the steps of his mother's building, his face grim. They didn't say much. Most of them. They just stood there behind me, beside me, a silent, united front. The Iron Disciples looked around, outnumbered not by force, but by the quiet, steely resolve of ordinary people who had finally had enough. Spike's eyes scanned the crowd, then landed back on me. The anger was still there, but it was mixed with something else. Maybe a grudging respect. Or maybe just the realization that this wasn't a fight he could easily win, not without causing a much bigger scene than he wanted. He spat on the ground, a gesture of contempt, but his voice was less confident when he spoke. This ain't over, Baker lady. Oh, I think it is, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. I think you'll find Oak Haven isn't quite as welcoming as you thought. Not when you abuse its hospitality. Spike stared at me for a long moment, then jerked, his head at his men. Let's go. They swaggered back to their bikes, but some of the arrogance seemed to have been knocked out of them. They revved their engines, a final defiant roar, and then, one by one, they rode out of town. We all stood there, watching them go, until the last rumble of their engines faded into the distance. Then, a shaky sigh rippled through our little crowd. Mr. Petrov put a hand on my shoulder. You did good, Sarah. Real good. Mrs. Gable hugged me. Oh, Sarah, you were so brave. I didn't feel brave. I felt shaky and exhausted, but also lighter. Like a heavy weight had been lifted from my chest, a weight I hadn't even fully realized I was carrying. I looked around at the faces of my friends and neighbors, at their expressions of relief and gratitude, and something warm spread through me. This was community. This was what Mark had loved about Oak Haven. Later that day, Mrs. Henderson came to the bakery. She held my hand, her eyes shining. Thank you, dear, she whispered. You gave an old woman back her street. That meant more to me than anything, it turned out standing up that day wasn't just about getting rid of the bikers. It was about finding myself again. Mark had always been the strong one, the outgoing one. I'd leaned on him, sheltered in his confidence. When he died, I thought that part of me, the part that could be strong, had died with him. But it hadn't. It was just buried, waiting. The bikers didn't come back. Word got around, I suppose. Maybe they found another town to bother. Or maybe, just maybe, they learned a little something about pushing people too far. The sweet spot started to thrive again. Mrs. Periwinkle came back for her scone. Little Lily started visiting for cookies, her laughter echoing in the shop once more. Main Street felt like Main Street again, friendly, peaceful, ours, and me. I wasn't just Sarah, the grieving widow, Sarah, the quiet baker anymore. I was Sarah, the woman who stood up to the iron disciples. It still sounded strange in my head. But when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see just a tired, flour-dusted woman. I saw a flicker of something else, something stronger. I started talking to people more, not just about bread and pastries, but about the town. We formed a little Main Street committee. Mr. Petrov was the chairman, but he always asked for my opinion. We organized a fall festival, something Oakhaven hadn't had in years. The bakery was the hub, of course, filled with the scent of spiced apple cakes and pumpkin pies. I even found myself speaking up at town council meetings, advocating for better lighting on the side streets, for a new bench in the park. My voice didn't tremble anymore. It was steady. It was heard. Sometimes when I'm kneading dough late at night, the bakery quiet and still, I'll feel a sense of Mark beside me. I'll imagine him smiling, that proud, loving smile of his. And I'll whisper to the empty air, "See, Mark, I did it. We did it." It wasn't that I became a different person. I was still me. I still loved the quiet rhythm of baking. I still sometimes felt a pang of loneliness so sharp it took my breath away. But I'd found a strength I didn't know I possessed, a voice I didn't know I could use. The bikers, in their own rough, unpleasant way, had pushed me too far. And in doing so, they'd forced me to show them, and more importantly, to show myself, who I really was. I was Sarah. And I was stronger than I thought. I was a part of Oakhaven, and Oakhaven was a part of me. And together, we were pretty darn resilient. The months that followed were a gentle unfolding. The fear that had gripped Oakhaven slowly uncurled, like a fist relaxing. People lingered on the sidewalks again. Conversations flowed easier. The incident with the Iron Disciples became a story. A local legend almost, recounted with a mixture of lingering apprehension and a newfound pride. And somehow, I was always at the center of that story. It felt strange, but also good. I learned that who I really was wasn't some hidden superhero identity. It was the quiet determination that had always been there, the love for my community, the empathy that Mark had cherished in me. It was the part of me that couldn't stand by and watch injustice, especially towards those who couldn't easily defend themselves. The bikers had simply provided the harsh catalyst to bring it to the surface. Sheriff Brody stopped by the bakery a week after the confrontation. He bought a dozen donuts. "For the boys at the station," he said, but I saw him sneak one into his mouth before he even left the shop. "Sarah," he said, his expression serious but kind, "I wanted to thank you. Officially, unofficially, however you want to take it. You did what I couldn't, not easily anyway. You rallied the town. You showed everyone that Oakhaven isn't a pushover. We all did it, Sheriff," I replied, wiping flour from my apron. I guess I just spoke first." He chuckled. "Sometimes that's all it takes. Someone brave enough to speak first." Brave. I still wasn't sure if that word fit me. Terrified, but determined maybe. One of the biggest changes was in me, though. I started looking people in the eye again, really seeing them. I found myself engaging in conversations beyond pleasantries. I learned that young Tom, the mechanic, was saving up to go to night school. I found out Maria from the diner had a daughter who was a brilliant artist but was too shy to show her work. So, we organized a small art show at the community hall. Maria's daughter, Sophia, reluctantly agreed to display her vibrant paintings. The whole town turned out. Seeing the pride on Maria's face and the shy, overwhelmed joy on Sophia's as people admired her talent, that was a feeling almost as good as pulling a perfect loaf of sourdough from the oven. The sweet spot became more than just a bakery. It became a meeting place, a comfort zone. People would drop by not just for bread or pastries, but for a chat, for advice, to share news. I put up a community notice board, and it was soon overflowing with flyers for local events, services offered, items for sale, lost cat posters. I even started a baking basics class on Saturday afternoons. Just a few people at first, then more. We'd laugh as flour flew, share stories as dough rose. It wasn't just about teaching them to bake. It was about connection. It was about building those invisible threads that tie a community together, making it strong. Mark would have loved it. He always said baking was about sharing love. Of course, there were still quiet evenings when the bakery was closed, and the silence of my little apartment above the shop felt vast and empty. The ache of Mark's absence never truly disappeared. It became a part of me, like a phantom limb, a dull throb that reminded me of what I'd lost. But now, it wasn't the only thing I felt. There was also purpose, connection, and a quiet sense of accomplishment. One day, a few months after the incident, a sleek, expensive-looking car pulled up outside the sweet spot. A man in a sharp suit got out. My heart did a little nervous flutter. Old habits die hard. He came in, looked around, and then his eyes settled on me. "Are you Sarah?" he asked. His voice was polite, professional. "Yes, I am," I said, bracing myself for I didn't know what. "My name is Arthur Jensen," he said, offering a hand. "I represent a consortium that's been, let's say, having some public relations issues with one of the groups we occasionally sponsor for charity rides, the Iron Disciples." I just stared at him. He continued, a little uncomfortably. "We heard about what happened here in Oak Haven, about how they were behaving, and about you and the town standing up to them. It seems your little town caused quite a stir. They're not used to being told no so effectively." He paused, then said, "Mr. Spike, their leader, was apparently quite impressed. In his own way, said you had guts. Coming from him, that's high praise, believe it or not." I didn't know whether to laugh or be horrified. "Impressed?" "Look," Mr. Jensen said, "what I'm trying to say is, their behavior was unacceptable. It reflected badly on us, their sponsors. We've had a very stern talk with their leadership. There will be adjustments, and part of that is making amends. We'd like to make a donation to your town, perhaps for a community project, as a gesture of goodwill, and frankly, to help repair some of the damage to their and our reputation." I was speechless. A donation? From the sponsors of the Iron Disciples? What kind of project did you have in mind? I asked, my mind reeling. "That's up to you and your community," he said. "We were thinking something that benefits everyone. Maybe improvements to that little park I saw by the fountain?" The park, where the children's laughter had faded, where Mrs. Henderson had been frightened. We talked for a while longer. He was genuine, or at least his corporation was genuinely concerned about their image. I told him I'd discuss it with the Main Street Committee, and we did. There was a lot of debate. Some people were suspicious, wanting nothing to do with money connected, however indirectly, to the bikers. Others saw it as an opportunity. I saw it as a chance to turn something ugly into something beautiful. In the end, we accepted the donation. We used it to renovate the park. New benches, a safer climbing frame for the children, beautiful new flower beds that Mrs. Henderson herself helped design. We even installed better lighting, something I'd been advocating for. The day we reopened the park, the whole town came. There was music, games, And of course, plenty of food from the sweet spot. I baked a huge cake, decorated with sugar flowers that mirrored the ones in the new beds. As I watched the children laughing, climbing on the new equipment, as I saw elderly residents sitting comfortably on the new benches, chatting, I felt a profound sense of peace, of a circle completed. Even Sheriff Brody was there, off duty, playing catch with his son. He came over to me, a slice of my cake in his hand. "You know, Sarah," he said, "I've been a cop for 20 years. I've seen a lot of ways to fight battles. Guns, fists, laws. But what you did here, what this town did, it was different. You fought with heart, and you won." I smiled. "We all have our strengths, Sheriff." It turned out, who she really wasn't a warrior in the traditional sense. I wasn't Xena, warrior princess, suddenly revealed. I was just Sarah, a baker who loved her town, her late husband's memory, and her neighbors. My strength wasn't in physical power, but in the courage to speak out, the ability to connect, and the quiet, stubborn refusal to let darkness win. The bikers had pushed me. Yes. They'd pushed me past my fear, past my grief-stricken inertia, past my inclination to stay invisible, and in doing so, they'd inadvertently helped me find the path back to myself, and helped Oakhaven rediscover its own resilient spirit. Life in Oakhaven settled into a new, more vibrant rhythm. The sweet spot continued to be its warm, fragrant heart. I still got up before dawn, the ritual of baking a comfort and a joy. But now, as I shaped the dough, I wasn't just thinking of Mark, though he was always there, a gentle presence. I was also thinking of the town, of the people, of the small ways I could contribute, the small acts of kindness that, woven together, made our community strong. The Iron Disciples never came back. Occasionally, a lone biker or a small quieter group would pass through, stop for gas or a quick bite at the diner, but they were respectful, almost subdued. It was as if Oakhaven was marked on some invisible map as, "Don't mess with this town." I guess in the end, the story wasn't just about me showing them who I was. It was about all of us in Oakhaven remembering who we were, a community, a family of sorts. And sometimes, families have to stand together, firm and unyielding, to protect what they love. And that, I learned, was a strength more powerful than any leather-clad gang on roaring motorcycles. It was the strength of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, simply by caring enough to try. And I was proud, so deeply proud to be one of them.